We'll begin with opening statements. The chair is now recognized. 18 cities, 11 states, 3 counties, and the District of Columbia are sanctuary jurisdictions, accounting for 31% of the population in this country. 31% of the American people, almost 1/3 of the American people, live in a city, county, or state where the left-wing leadership tells local law enforcement not to work with federal law enforcement. Now, what does that mean in practice? Let's look at Abraham Gonzalez, who on September 20th, 2023, was arrested by Border Patrol for illegally entering the United States. And of course, the Biden administration released him into the country. 5 months later, February 26, 2024, Mr. Gonzalez is charged with assault. 2 weeks later, March 11, 2024, he's charged with felony motor vehicle theft, stole a car. And on March 20th, 2024, 9 days later, he's arrested by the Denver police and placed in the Denver Justice Center. 6 days later, March 22nd, 2024, ICE sends a detainer notice to the Denver Justice Center saying this: if you're going to release Mr. Gonzalez, can you give us a heads up? Can you let us know maybe 48 hours before you're going to release this guy so we can come apprehend him there at the jail? And remember, a detainer is a final order of removal from a court where this individual or this individual's committed some removable offense. But on February 28th, 2025, Abraham Gonzalez is released to the streets. In fact, we can put that up. I think you can see this. Released, we got the form from the Denver Justice Center. What kind of inmate was Mr. Gonzalez for those 345 days that he was in the Denver Justice Center? We have that too. Violent to the staff, keep separate. So this guy was so bad, you had to keep him away from other inmates. He'd already assaulted some staff member. Denver released this guy to the streets and instead of turning him over to ICE agents who would have come to the jail and arrested him there. And of course, we all know what happens. When the officers did apprehend Mr. Gonzalez out on the street, he assaulted one of the officers. This is what happens when you have a sanctuary jurisdiction. Right now in Minnesota, there are 1,360 detainer notices for violent offenders. Governor Walz and others have released 470 criminal illegal aliens back to the streets. In New York State, it's 7,000. Nationwide, it's over 17,000 that we know of. Where a detainer was filed, since President Trump's been in office, over 17,000 times a detainer was filed, and those individuals were released to the streets instead of turned over to federal law enforcement. 17,864 times. Illegals who've been charged with the crime have been released to the streets, and thereby jeopardizing the safety of the public, the safety of law enforcement, and of course the migrant themselves. And frankly, helping create the environment that results in the tragic deaths like we saw with Ms. Good and Mr. Preddy. A few years ago, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders said this in response to the State of the Union address. She said, "The divide in America today is normal versus crazy." And it's true, because it's crazy not to have a border, which is what we had under the previous administration. It's crazy to abolish ICE, and it's crazy to release bad guys who are here illegally to the streets when with one phone call, federal law enforcement will come to the jail and pick them up. The mindset that says it's okay to release these guys is the same left-wing mindset that thinks it's okay to weaponize government against your political opponents. And that is exactly what we had in the previous Justice Department. The Biden-Harris Department of Justice called parents domestic terrorists. The Biden-Harris Justice Department used FBI SWAT teams to arrest pro-life advocates. The Biden-Harris DOJ targeted traditional Catholics. The Biden-Harris DOJ pressured social media companies to censor Americans. And the Biden-Harris Justice Department launched not one, but 2 investigations into President Trump, spending over $35 million to try to bring down their political opponent. To further this effort, they sought the phone records of over a dozen Republican members of Congress. Even the Democrats said this was wrong. They got bank records for scores of White House officials. They even paid at least one confidential human source $20,000 for information on President Trump. And of course, while doing all this, they couldn't tell us who planted the pipe bombs, who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and who put cocaine in the White House. But thank goodness the American people saw through it all. Americans were tired of being targeted for their beliefs, tired of the lawfare, tired of the rampant crime throughout this country, and that's why they overwhelmingly elected President Trump. And what a difference a year makes. What a difference a year makes. Under Attorney General Bondi, the DOJ has returned to its core missions, upholding the rule of law, going after the bad guys, and keeping Americans safe. The Trump Justice Department has restored the rule of law. Murders are down nationwide by 20%. In D.C., violent crime is down by 28%. The federal surge in D.C. resulted in 8,000 arrests, the seizure of 800 illegal guns, and the recovery of 16 missing kids. The Trump Justice Department apprehended a suspect in the pipe bomb investigation, and they've arrested 6 of the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives in just 1 year. Of course, they arrested narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro, and they seized a record number of drugs flowing into this country. The Trump Justice Department put an end to targeting Americans for their beliefs. Attorney General Bondi rescinded Attorney General Garland's anti-parent memorandum. Department of Justice ended the practices of using the FACE Act to target pro-life Americans. They've refused to tolerate attacks on places of worship and investigations of traditional Catholics that we saw in the previous administration. On her first day, Attorney General Bondi disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force that was pressuring social media companies to censor Americans. And the Trump Justice Department has ended lawfare. Under Attorney General Bondi, along with Director Patel, they've worked to expose the political nature of Arctic Frost and the Jack Smith investigations. They've turned over hundreds of pages of documents to Congress, and that's why we know, for example, that Mr. Smith paid at least $20,000 to some confidential human source. That's why we know that Jack Smith knew it was unconstitutional to seek to toll records from members. But since the litigation risk was low, and because members would never find out about the subpoena until years later, they charged ahead and violated the Constitution. The Trump Justice Department has changed DOJ policy to require prosecutors to tell judges if NDOs relate to members of the separate and equal branch of government, the Congress. And to top it all off, the Trump Justice Department opened an investigation into the conspiracy behind the Russia collusion hoax. The Justice Department has put common sense ahead of politics. They sued to keep boys out of girls' sports. They secured deals with universities to stop race-based admissions and anti-Semitic practices. And after discovering rampant fraud in Minnesota, the Justice Department, under the leadership of Attorney General Bondi, has established a new National Fraud Division. In fact, I met with Colin McDonald, who will head that division, last week. I think he's going to do a great job. There's a lot of work to be done in that area, but I want to thank the Attorney General for her great work in the first year on the job, and I want to thank you for being here. With that, I would yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News. Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today.